Oh, I didn't have to ask for permission that time.
Oh, nice.
All right. You ready?
Do it.
All right. Welcome to Essential Coaching Conversations with Kyle and Asim.
The real, relevant, necessary conversations to help you navigate coaching, teaching, learning, and life.
Coaches, welcome back to Essential Coaching Conversations. I think this is a bit of a rarity here over the last 6 months a couple of rare things. Number one, we're recording 2 weeks in a row. But number two, we have another guest. And this time, our guest is Wyatt Olson. He's the Associate AD for Internal Operations at Louisiana Tech. And we'll jump to him in a minute. But again, we want to just say thank you to the folks that have made this year really special. We actually got our Spotify Wrapped the other day, Kyle. We were in 10 countries. We were a top 30 podcast in one of the segments that we were in. I forgot what it was, but that's pretty cool to be a top 30 podcast in any segment. Because as far as I'm concerned, I think we are not. We are like the bottom podcast there is. We're just two random guys who have conversations about stuff. So no, just very thankful to all of our listeners, especially just coming off Thanksgiving here in the U.S. But Kyle, I'm going to throw it to you so we can maximize our time here. What do you got for the people out there?
Yeah, man, good to see you. We'll get introduced Wyatt here in a second. We had to search far and wide to bring a guy like him in. Had to go down the hallway to have a conversation with Wyatt to see about getting him on the pod with us tonight. But no, thankful that he's here. Again, thank you to everybody that continues to listen. And top 30 anywhere is amazing. Appreciate all 13, 14 followers that we have. And now that Wyatt's here, maybe his mom will listen and we can get to 15. Um, but yeah, man, just very thankful, very appreciative. And real quick before we jump in, thank you to those that have joined in on the Chuck's Challenge. I've had some people send me some pictures of coaching, teaching, working in their Chuck Taylors. I'm drinking once again out of my Chuck Taylor coffee mug. And appreciate everybody that has jumped in on the challenge and support Mark David, his story 25 years ago, lost a friend to drunk driving. And this has been our way of just keeping his memory alive and sharing his story and hopefully, bringing up a conversation, raising some awareness and keeping somebody from making a real tragic decision that can affect a lot of lives for a really long time. So appreciate everybody that has jumped in on that. But on that note, yeah, Wyatt and I obviously work very closely together. I mean, he kind of calls us the yin and yang. He's the internal ops guy. I'm the external ops guy. And my area and my role gets a lot more public face. Obviously, the word external, but we are very heavily reliant on Wyatt and his crew to be able to do our jobs because they set us up. So when we think about the central coaching pyramid and the foundation of everything, the human component, the relationships, the internal operations side for any athletic department, any program out there is really the foundation because we can't go do our jobs without the work and the communication and all the things, the preparation that the internal squads do. And Wyatt does a really great job with his crew. He takes time out of an extremely busy schedule to find time to talk leadership, read books with his guys, and I just think some of the stuff that he does very intentionally is important. It's important work. It's work that doesn't get done enough in any organization around the country or the world. And so I've really enjoyed getting to know him and work with him. He's a pro in every sense of the word, a former student athlete. And again, I'll let him introduce himself and give a little backstory here in a second. But just really excited to talk about some of the work that he's doing at Louisiana Tech with his crew and then some of the thoughts and studies that he has on transitioning out of college life into the real world, kind of becoming a civilian. And I know we think about this a lot in terms of athletic life, student athletes that are having to figure out how to not be an athlete. Their identity is so wrapped up in being an athlete their entire lives, and all of a sudden they're not. And Wyatt does an even better job expanding that focus, like not even in athletic life. You've been going to college. You now what? I need to go find a job. We've been trying to hire a ton of people. We're on Zooms with these kids, 22, 23, 24 years old. Some are in their late 20s. It's like they're still trying to figure out what it is they want to do. And so we'll let him kind of dive into some of his thoughts and the studies that he's doing there. But before we get to that, we will go through the best thing we saw, our Heat the Cheese segment. I was kind of busting y'all's chops about making sure you had one, and then I had one that kind of slipped my mind. Um, so, but I will say, I think the best thing that I've seen recently was we had a coworker, Wyatt and I, who just adopted a baby, and they got back and from Utah. They were gone for 3 weeks and starting their family. And the best thing that I've seen, what the thing that I love about Ruston and small communities and college towns like that is how much we pour around each other, and there's just a real sense of community and the support that his family has seen, and even just office full of diapers and Amazon registries and just everybody walking around congratulating G and Samantha and little Eva Grace, and just how awesome it's been to know what they've gone through to get there, and the just the emotional struggle, and just what you have to go through to try to get through that entire process. And Asim and one of our Thursday night OGs, Bubba, they've gone through this a couple of times with an adoption process, and just it's not an easy thing to do. And so it's really really cool when you see this really great outpouring and support of other people, and just how happy somebody can be for somebody else when they're going on the pursuit of trying to help bring a life into the world. And so, I mean, that to me has been really cool, getting G back in the office, and just the new dad beam, which is really like bloodshot eyes and tiredness, because you're getting used to that cycle. But dude, smiling ear to ear, and we're really happy for him and his family. So that was the best thing I've seen. So Wyatt, I'll throw it over to you. And if you want to just kind of jump in with a little bit about who you are, and then segue into best thing you've seen, and then we'll let Asim jump in.
Yeah, absolutely. No, for starters, thank you guys for having me on. I mean, it's a privilege, honor. I'm grateful for it that Kyle reached out and me doing this. So thank you guys for having me. And Kyle talking about how I set him up. I mean, man, he set me up right there. I feel like I don't even have to say anything about myself. But now, but now, as far as my background, I've lived in Louisiana now for over 2 years, working on year three here. But born and raised in Wisconsin, from South Central Wisconsin, closer to the Illinois border. Um, and then I grew up a sports guy. I played primarily football and baseball were my sports growing up. But baseball was kind of always my passion, and something that I was always striving at, and seemed to be good at. And so after high school, I got a couple offers, but essentially went to junior college, 2 year school in Iowa at Indian Hills Community College. And it was a pretty neat opportunity. One, to get me out of really my comfort zone, that one of our assistant coaches at the time would always say of getting out of the comfort zone, and that was definitely that time there of being away from home, 6 hours away in a different state, different kind of culture and perspective of junior college living, and how baseball and school set you up for those next 2 years at that 4 year university. But it was a great time there. Learned a lot about myself, not only as a player, as a student, but personally as well. And so after my 2 years there, graduating with my associates, I got a full ride athletic and academic scholarships at Niagara University in Niagara Falls, New York, and finished out my playing career there. My last 2 years, got my undergrad in business management there, and loved every minute of Niagara University. It was, again, learning opportunity about myself, and really kind of seeing myself grow, not only as a player but personally as well. And so a lot of neat takeaways. But at the end of the day, I was always striving towards being that baseball player for the rest of my life, and so um, I'd always been kind of talked about through college that, and even a little bit in high school, of kind of where the draft process is of getting to that minor league level and getting into a major league baseball organization. And talked with a lot of people, had opportunities to play after college, and decided to turn it down in that time. I think I put a lot of pressure on myself my senior year, probably, to kind of put a dive into it a little bit. And so at the end of the day, I was ready to kind of put up my cleats, but I didn't know exactly what the professional life was like for me. And so I thought it was going to be in New York still. I worked at trying to figure out a landing spot. I did a bunch of interviews the summer after I graduated in May, to try to stay in the Buffalo, Niagara area. And after some unsuccessful interviews and really trying to pinpoint what I wanted to do, I ended up, making the call of going back home, and kind of, staying with my family, and trying to, plant where I'm going to go next, and figure myself out a bit. And so in that time, I had some more interviews, failed interviews, didn't land a spot. I ended up having to kind of swallow my pride a little bit, and work manufacturing on a shop floor, something that was difficult for me to do, as being a guy that just finished his undergrad. I've got a degree, but still couldn't find a job, and so I had to work on the shop floor. And I will say that was probably one of the best decisions I've ever made. And again, learned a lot about myself from the personal and professional aspects there. Did that for 10 months. And through that time, I figured out kind of where my avenue was. And I felt like every week, there was a different avenue. I had an idea of myself in a lot of different areas, from going down the law degree aspect, from coaching, and teaching, and then going into looking at being a firefighter, and looking at EMS and EMT and all of that. Um, and until I finally figured out I wanted to be back in college athletics, and I never thought about it ever really, about being an athletic director, until it kind of all clicked in, of not necessarily wanting to be specific on a specific sport, which was always baseball for me, but really being passionate about student athletes in general, and being able to grow people, and doing that on a wider scale, through college athletics. And so it finally clicked, of wanting to be an athletic director, and also getting out of the cold weather. So another thing that I had, I've got an aunt and uncle that live in the Dallas area, and I saved up some money through working in manufacturing, of staying with them for a week, and trying to get connected and plugged in, to see what was out there in Texas. And so in July of that next year, I ended up finding my way through connection with my aunt, an athletic director at a Division III school in Texas called Howard Payne University, and was able to, one of my days there, connect with him. And uh, he's been a huge mentor for me still now to this day. I actually just got off the phone with him yesterday, but um, he was a guy that they needed a position. A graduate assistant position was open for marketing and game administration at the time. And so, kind of just our general conversation, one thing led to another. And so ended up taking the job, and did my master's there as well. And so about a year and a half in, learned a ton about some things. Ended up tweaking my job to more of marketing and engagement, learning a lot about the game operations, the marketing aspects. Did a bit of corporate sponsorships and partnerships as well through it, wearing many a different hats at a very small school. And so I learned a lot about college athletics there, and loved every minute of it. And so about a year and a half in, I ended up finding my first full-time job in college athletics at same conference institution at Sul Ross State University, which is in far west Texas. D3 school, now Division two, but was there as an assistant athletic director for compliance. And the funny thing I always say about this is, though my title was compliance, there was one line at the very bottom of my job description that said, uh, is responsible for all home athletic events and operations. So, funny way of saying that that was a lot of my job as well, not only the compliance stuff, but also the game operations, the marketing, the fan engagement, all of the things that pile on top of home sporting event operations. And so, again, learning a lot about the compliance aspect, but also learning or continuing to grow my knowledge in those game operations aspects. And so, um, after about almost 2 years there, I ended up through my mentor at Howard Payne University connecting me with the person that Kyle noted earlier with him having a baby. Those two um, knew each other, and that was my connection to Louisiana Tech, and being able to find my way here all the way to Ruston, Louisiana. I never thought I would ever live in Louisiana ever in my life, and if you were to tell me 6 years ago that I was going to be in this spot, I would have told you were crazy. Um, on top of that, um, right before I got this job, I started my doctoral journey at another school in Texas called Hardin Simmons University, and have been doing that since I started. And so I am in year three now, and I've got this little half left, and one more academic year, and then I'll be done with my doctoral degree. But it's emphasis. It's a doctorate in education with the emphasis of leadership. So I'm all for the leadership talks and all of the conversations there. So excited to get to talk in a little bit more detail with you. But that's a little bit about me. Long story short, or long story longer, depending on how you're looking at it. But to kind of answer Kyle's question of some things that have been going on, or one good thing to heat the cheese. I'm going to throw that at our makeshift culture committee, or what others like to call our party planning committee, that we've been spearheading. If you like The Office, you'll love this committee. But
I knew I liked you, man. The
yeah,
Office
that's
is the greatest
right.
show ever created.
That's right. So no, they've been. I've been helping lead that. It was kind of just fell into my lap a little bit, and just tried to make the best of it with what we had. And so I had to kind of piece a lot of people from the athletic department to it, and had to force some hands too to get into this culture committee, or the party planning committee. And so we just had our office Christmas party last night, and to be honest, I didn't touch too much of it besides finding the location and what we had to eat. The rest of the crew, from the setup, the tear down, all the stuff that they did in getting that set up, I can't thank them enough for all that they did. The decorations were awesome. Music was great. We had music bingo and the prize and all that stuff, and everything that they did in getting that set up and situated was awesome. And so I can't thank them enough for what they did and putting that on. I know I was kind of the face of the committee, but they did all the work. So can't thank them enough.
It was great until I was one square away from $500, and
I knew he was going to say that.
I needed up on the housetop, and our men's basketball ops, Dobo Brooke, got the Chipmunk song, and she won $500. I was pretty disappointed, but no, it was a great night. Wyatt and his crew did a good job. Real quick before you jump in, Asim, the reason that I love Wyatt's story, and we'll dive into this a little bit more, is just how like winding and twisting it is. And you listen to everything that Wyatt just talked about, and I kind of joke about this with like my education background in teaching. Like Wyatt sounds like he's 65 years old. Like he's already done all these different things and had this miraculous journey and this and that. And he's still just a baby. What are you, like 28, late 20s? And so, like, packing all of that experience into such a short amount of time, I think is incredible. And I don't like all three of us, I think something we have in common is that none of us thought we'd be sitting here doing what we're doing right now. I mean, Asim and I were two basketball coaches that met each other across basketball, and we thought we would all coach till we were 80 years old and die on the court of a heart attack. And neither one of us is sitting on a bench right now. It's just kind of crazy how that works. And I think this identity thing that aspect that you talk about, Wyatt, is a story that everybody can at least relate to, because I think there are a ton of people out there right now that deal with that, or maybe if they're not, like maybe you're a coach and you knew you would always coach and you're still doing that, but you're coaching kids that are going to go through that. And we always say that we're here to help them become better men and women and better this and better that. And I think this is an aspect of that story that doesn't get talked about enough, because we don't think about what is actually going on and kind of the lost part of where they're headed. So anyway, I just appreciate you sharing that. We've vamped as long as we can for you to figure out the best thing
I
that you
had it.
can.
I had it figured out already.
We I was like, I'm gonna have to go for 20 minutes here before Seam will figure out the best thing to solve. But anyway, you said you got one, so
I do. And I love, and we're gonna get more into Wyatt's story and kind of the twisty, windy road, but I will echo what Kyle said about how that is. I mean, it's not something that I think growing up any of us were probably taught of, like, you go to college, you get your degree, you play a sport, whatever, right? And like there's sort of this linear pathway, and that goes off the rails pretty quick. And how you respond to that and kind of what you do with it to make something out of nothing or make something out, whatever you want for your life. I think that is a huge lesson that all of us had to learn in different ways, but being able to impart that to young people especially is huge. For me, the best thing that I saw this week was something that we had been talking about. We talked about on the last pod of, how there's this common phrase of defense wins championships. I'm sure it's painted somewhere in the tack down there, like in somebody's office or something. But we came to the conclusion that it's not defense itself that wins championships, but connections that win championships. And so, we have a shirt. We'll link it in the show notes. We just designed it today. And that's the best thing I saw because I designed it. So clearly it is great. No, I'm just kidding. It's a very rudimentary design, but it's a nice little stocking stuffer for the coach in your life. But it is true, right? And I think I am big on, and I'm sure Kyle is as well, since we're both wearing our gear today, wearing messages that resonate with people or that make people sort of do a double take and look at your shirt. So I was actually wearing that Heat the Cheese hoodie or the Cheese Be Cold hoodie yesterday. I went to the store and I saw this gentleman. He actually, like, he did do the double take and looked at my shirt because he was trying to figure out, why is there a block of cheese on this dude's shirt?
with snowflakes on it.
With snowflakes on it, right? Like, what is going on right now? And I didn't stop to explain it to him. I didn't want to blow up his spot and be like, "Hey, man, you were staring at me. Do you want to have a conversation?" Right? Like, I didn't want to do that in the middle of the store, but it did at least pique his interest. And I hope he went home and Googled it, because I'm hopeful that, if you Google Heat the Cheese, at least on page 14 of the results, you're going to find our website and you're going to find the blogs about it. You're going to find the pod episode. Wyatt, if you have any tips on SEO stuff about that to try to get us on page 1 of Google, we will take them. But anyway, the best thing that I saw this week was that design of our T-shirt, available on Bonfire right now. We'll put it in the show notes for sure. But again, like I think the bigger part is just being able to use it as a conversation starter, use it as a way to espouse the beliefs of like what actually leads to success, being connection. And so I'm glad we get to connect today and dive right into this piece about transitions. But Kyle, I want to throw it to you first here. Then maybe you can throw this to Wyatt. I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you and I have talked a lot about not just transitioning out of athletics as adults, but also like what happens to a lot of our kids whether it was college kids or high school kids, after they graduate and the institution is no longer there for them.
Yeah, I think one of the greatest thing about sport is how you fit into something and the sense of belonging and the community around it, and it does give you a sense of identity and purpose and so on and so forth. But the problem with that is that eventually it will end. And even if you play professionally until you're 40 years old, like 40 still, I hope, is still relatively young because I'm about to turn 40. So there's still hopefully a lot of life to live. And it's I think we do a really good job of emphasizing the sense of belonging in a team. And that and really to the we do a good job, but kind of to a fault. And you hear like the term family thrown around a lot, at work, at organizations. I mean, we talk about the tech family all the time. I think of Ruston as like this Ruston family, and the intentions are, I think, for the most part, but eventually, like, family is family, and everything else is not. And you end up, being told you're either really good at something, or this is how you find value in life, or how many points you score, how many home runs you hit, um, how many tackles you have, how many championships you have. And for athletes, that's how they kind of view themselves, and that's how they fit in, and it's where they find themselves in their social pecking orders with their friend groups and all these things. And eventually the ball stops bouncing. Like, Wyatt and I get to see, all these senior days all throughout the year, working with all of our programs. And a lot of our athletes like have visions of playing pro somewhere, and that's great. But for many of them, it doesn't work out, right? Or they know that they're done. I know that's my last game. I know I'm taking the jersey off for the last time. And now I got to go find a job. Now I got to go be an adult. I got to kind of grow up really fast. And there's just I'm not aware of very many classes that you can take called "What do I do when I'm done with school?" Like, everybody knows that the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, but nobody knows how to do their taxes, right? Like, everybody knows a squared plus b squared equals c squared, but nobody knows what to do when you have to get on a Zoom with Wyatt to try to get a job as an internal ops director. And then when you get that, like, even if you do get that job, like, how do you move 6 hours away to get out of your comfort zone and fit into a new place? How do you learn the culture of where it is that you are? How do you learn how to handle HR processes, and how to get your paycheck, and where to go to like, just adult life things? And again, we as coaches, we say these things to get jobs, that we are going to prepare young people for life. And really what we mean is that we're going to yell at them so they won't be so soft. Then somehow that will prepare them for a boss to yell at them one day. And I think that's kind of the where we essentially stop with it. Like, we're not really equipping them with the skills and the human capital and the emotional agility and intelligence and stuff that we need to equip to actually be successful. And again, I mean, move 6 hours. I don't know how people do it. Like, I moved an hour away from where I grew up, and it's just, I'm amazed when anybody is willing to move to Rustiana from New York, or from Murray, Kentucky, or from Florida, or anything like that, to have the courage to do something like that, and then come in here and transition, and then be successful, be good at what you do. Um, and so we talk about that a lot from sport, and where Wyatt and I have been able to have some conversations. And again, he does a really good job with his crew, and leading them, and taking time to have these kinds of conversations, is not just from the athletic sense, but even just the academic sense. Like, if you get an engineering degree, all right, you got to go. You learned how to do engineering, but now you got to go be an engineer. You learned how to do banking, but now you have to go be a banker. And those are two completely different things in a lot of ways. So I'll kind of just throw it over to you, Wyatt, to talk about some of your initial thoughts on that stuff, kind of like where that obviously it resonates with you because you thought you were going to be a firefighter one day, and now you're trying to be an athletic director, and you're trying to figure out where you're going to go. And you came through it through the athletic lens, like, thought I was going to play pro, and eventually that was not going to happen for you. So just kind of more curious, kind of what piques your interest in this kind of subject and topic, and kind of some of the conversations that you have with the Eastons, Peters, and Davids and Brandons of the world that you get to work with every day.
Yeah. Um, so I guess, my initial thoughts of that is in higher education, right? Things have changed significantly and drastically ever since obviously COVID happened, um, with everything. But especially in this case of higher education, a lot of it is recruit and retain, right? And get enrollment up, get people in the door, um, and a lot of that sometimes can not translate on the back end of that, right? You get them in, they're in, and you keep them, but are they going through the steps of that learning curve to get them to be in a relatively successful spot when they graduate? And so, and a lot of it too is really being able to understand and define what why is in people and how to be able to create some sort of identity in people. And you sort of find that through college, but there's parts of you, especially from the athletic sense, when sports get ripped away from you, what is your identity after that? That was one thing for me personally to figure out, and I know a couple of my guys that were former student athletes, um, it's been kind of ripped from them, and they're still trying to figure out what their why is, what their purpose is, and sometimes it's difficult for them to figure out, if what they're doing on a daily basis really matters. And so I think, from our standpoint, and the reasons why I started the leadership development um, within our group is being able to help navigate some sort of clarity in their messy lanes or path they're on, right? It's not as clear to them, but the leadership development aspects can be some sort of that clarity for them, to be able to find what gets them to tick, what really gets them excited about something, whether it be a job that they're doing, whether it be a characteristic that they have in leadership, or whether it be just something that piques their interest outside of both of those things. And so being able to explain some of my background knowledge and through our book readings that we have, we're able to kind of share those things and our philosophies and different perspectives and backgrounds to help kind of mold and shape, kind of our clay that we have, if you will, um, to be able to kind of channel what that looks like for each of them, and what gets them to really just grow as individuals. I think that's the biggest thing that I always say is we're not growing professionally, but we're growing personally too through this. And so, just to kind of give the background of it too, what I do with my guys in the leadership development, I try to carve out an hour a week, and just specifically talk about leadership. We go through a book, whatever book that is that we're going through. We'll read a chapter a week. I don't like to do, hey, you got to read half the book, because I really want you to dive in page by page, word by word, and really pick up what they're saying. And sometimes it's fundamental stuff. Sometimes they already know what that means and have already seen it, already heard it. But in that aspect, there's some things that you need reminders of, and some things that maybe you didn't have formulated into words, but now you see them in words and it makes sense. And one of the biggest question I probably ask every week is, okay, you read this. How do you implement this in your own leadership characteristics, your own leadership style? And that's where you sort of start to dive into some of those aspects of who they are as a person, and where their identity kind of follows there. It may not be their purpose and their why, but they're formulating it, and you can see it kind of building within them as we kind of build and take a deeper dive into some of these books and some of these lessons and leadership aspects. So I don't know if that answered your question or if I went on a tangent, but that's a little bit about that, I think.
So I do want to point out one thing that you said and kind of maybe deep dive this a little bit.
Yeah.
You talked about the idea of like making a difference in the world and like is what I'm doing right now really making a difference?
Hmm.
And I actually have this thought a lot as I'm looking at, not just what we do in essential coaching and playmakers, but coaching, teaching. I said before we got on this call, like, or before we started recording, going through interview processes with some of these large corporations, and I think about like, what do folks even do at these places sometimes, right? Like, I call them jiggle jobs, where like you jiggle your mouse to show that you're active or whatever, and it's like, how much impact are you truly making on the world at large? And we all have influence in our spheres, and it seems like you are extending that through the people you work with and the people that you serve. But I'm curious, kind of, if you've noticed or if it's been shared with you, their interpretation of whether they feel like they're making an impact or not.
Hmm. Yeah. I feel like through the leadership development, um, it's made impacts. Definitely seen that, and I've heard that through there. There's some things in our jobs that it can be difficult to see on a daily basis if they're making an impact. But I feel like in the grand scheme of things, especially in some of the larger events that we run, you can tell where their piece plugs into that larger puzzle. And I think it goes back to kind of some of the things I've learned. um, the infinite game is kind of one of those things, and kind of something I'm working on with my dissertation of the difference between infinite game and finite games, right? And to kind of condense it into a shorter narrative, it's a difference between short term and long term thinking and mindset. And so it's easy for us to get caught up in the, am I really making a difference right now in the short term? Is moving this one table over here going to make that difference? Is really setting things up the way that it's maybe could be, is that really making a difference right now? When you look at it from the short term, sometimes it's fuzzy to see that, and being able to understand the larger picture and understand the long term, um, the long term mindset of it, you start to understand a little bit more of that larger photo of what are the things that I'm learning right now that are going to benefit me 5, 10 years down the road. I'll tell you, in my manufacturing job, I didn't learn that I was a leader until I learned through my manufacturing job that I had those leadership characteristics. Um, and it was just through casual conversation with people and just being able to be the fun guy, joke around, and be able to get people excited to come to a 12-hour shift at work 3 times or 3 consecutive days. It's tough being on your feet for 12 hours, so we got to have a little bit of fun with it. And so I was able to kind of just formulate through that and understand a little bit more of my leadership, because I feel like always the idea of that, or for me growing up in sports, is always I'm the leader by example, right? I show up early, I get extra in, I stay late, get extra in, and I'm always there, right? And staying on top of things. But in the manufacturing job, I was able to not only lead by example, but lead through relationships. I felt like more so than I did as being a baseball player, or maybe not that, but recognizing it more, because baseball or a sport wasn't tied to it, and it was literally just a job. In the grand scheme of things, if you're looking at it from the short term, it's just a job, but from the long term, I look back and one of the stepping stones for me of where I'm at now. And so being able to find that long-term mindset and that infinite mindset is able to kind of help clear that perspective for you of being able to, okay, what did I learn today that's going to impact me tomorrow? It doesn't have to be 5, 10 years down the line. It can be, what did I learn today that's going to make me better tomorrow? And so I think that's some of the things that it's a slow process. Obviously, it's hard to teach that just from one day or a couple months. But I feel like that process is starting to work through people, and I know from a couple other interns that or other staff members that I've had before. I feel like that still reminisces with them as well, and has carried them in their jobs that they're in now.
Phrases is climate over culture. And the word culture gets used and abused and thrown out there so much, and it's all about culture, 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 culture. But culture is more of that deep rooted, embedded, long term. Like, me moving this table right now isn't going to change the culture of this place. Me showing up and doing this one shift isn't, going to make or break the culture. But the climate, the right now, the in the moment stuff, you do have the power to impact that. And your culture ends up becoming the aggregate of all of these small climate things and moments. And so it comes down to another one of our little EC isms is the next best decision. And the way we define character here is not, good kids, not cheating on tests, not breaking the law and actively not doing wrong things, but it's actively doing right things. And so character that and Asim puts this beautifully is the positive or the consistency of our positive habits. It's the ability to make the next best decision that you can in the moment with what you have right now. And we're very intentional about that phraseology because saying, like, hey, I need you to make the right decision right now versus the wrong decision can put a lot of pressure on you. And that can stress somebody out and it can kind of add a whole lot. But it's if you just worry about making the next best decision you can for yourself, for the organization, for the program, for the whatever, everybody has the ability to do that. You don't have to be a quote unquote leader. You don't have to have a certain title. You don't have to do this or that. And it's always the right time to do the right thing. If moving that table and putting it in a certain place and doing it in a certain way is technically the quote unquote right thing to do or the next best thing that you can do. No, it might not change the trajectory of Louisiana Tech athletics, but your mindset and ability to do that, when nobody's looking, quote unquote, is what character is about because it is the consistency of that positive habit and it's you dominating the climate. And I think what we have been really intentional about or trying to be intentional about is getting people to focus more on dominating climate because if you can't dominate that, then you're never going to change the evolutionary thinking of the long term type stuff. And like you said, now that you start to see it, you're 28 now. You've worked with people that you've seen have gone off and do this. A seems taught coach for 10, 15 years. I taught coach for 12, 13. Kids that we taught and coached are now married with babies and teaching and coaching. And they come back and they tell you, hey, man, this didn't really make sense then. Like, I didn't understand why moving that table meant something then. But now I get that. And you start to see that payoff. And yes, that might be 10, 15 years down the road. But knowing that you have so much power in the next best decision is not only an empowering and a freeing thing, but I also think it can take a lot of pressure off because also, like, if you do the next best thing and it doesn't work out, it's not like you meant to do something wrong, right? Like it's not like you tried to sabotage anything or you were technically, if you're right or wrong, it's this black and white binary thing that you're living in. next best decision, there's a whole spectrum of possibilities and things that are outside of your control. There's a lot of luck that is involved in certain things. And so I'm glad you're talking about that, because I think it harps or it hits on a lot of what we try to teach and preach on. And then the other thing, and I'll throw this to a seam here real quick, is you mentioned like the leading by example piece, and we also have a pretty strong opinion on that phrase, but then you followed it up with leading with relationships, and I think that's when you get to the actual leading, because you're finally influencing somebody. But um, I'll throw it over to Asim real quick, 'cause I'm sure he has some thoughts on the leading by example piece. And then once you finally get, I think when people realize that they get kind of get past just that piece and getting to the people and the connections, that's when you really start to make some stuff happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think we are fairly well documented in knowing like leading by example is one of those sort of coach speaky phrases that I think every coach at some point said like, yeah, we need you to lead by example. Like I'm sure I sat down with players early in my career and was like, yeah, we really need you to lead by example. But the more you think about it, like you might be showing up early and doing all of that stuff, and if nobody's following you, then you're not leading anybody,
Mhm.
right? You got to have a follower at least
Right.
to be leading somebody. Um, and so I think, when you mention leading with relationships, like we define leadership as influence. And I often think about that even from the standpoint of like, and Kyle being the external ops guy, right? He's heavily into the social media stuff and like trying to create an influential brand and brand Louisiana Tech as a leader in the college athletic space and in doing all of those things. And I wonder from the internal side and kind of when you're working with your staff too, how you sort of not implement leadership. I don't think you can really implement like programs for that. I think they exist, but how do you get them to think about themselves as leaders that have influence, even though in a very hierarchical existence within college athletics, we know that college athletics is a very hierarchical, like almost militaristic existence
Yeah.
sometimes, right? How do you get sort of your maybe your part-time staff, your interns, your full-time staff that's not getting paid a whole lot of money? How do you get them to understand the importance of their own influence, not only on just the immediate environment, but the department as a whole, Rustin, and then the larger ecosystem and how it all works together?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I go off of you know, uh, people say the leader follower model, but I like to say that we're all leaders, and I think Kyle had just touched on it as well. Of kind of that leader aspect, that we're all leaders in some way, shape, or form. Though our title may not say we're a leader, we're all leaders in some aspect, and so I think for us in our area of internal operations, um, all the way down to our student workers, they all have a voice and opinions in ways that uh, their minds are different than maybe ours in being able to set up things. We've got different backgrounds and different even different people that have different bachelor's degrees or working towards in their undergrads. We've got in architecture, or we got the marketing or sports, but we've got mechanical engineering is one too. And so being able to formulate and come up with even the student workers on that level of things, being able to kind of go to them of, hey, how do you think we should set this up today? What is the most efficient and effective way that we can get this done? And being able to give them that voice and that room to breathe and feel like it's not a I got to do this and that's the only way to do it. Has been able to create that creativity in us to be able to think outside of the box. And so all the way down to our student workers, to our interns, full time, all of that. I feel like we've been able to give each other the room to breathe and to grow from that aspect of just being able to rely on each other from the leadership aspects, in that I can learn from a student worker just as a student worker can learn from me. It's not that I'm above you and I know all, but I'm learning stuff from student workers that I never thought I would ever learn. I've learned from one of our student workers about how to be a better handyman in some areas, and how to be able to fix some things up that I didn't think I would have ever known before. And even, and I say student workers like it's a far gap away from me, but just to say all of that, of just, our group is all about being able to learn from each other, grow from each other, because at the end of the day, we're as strong as our weakest link, right? I know that's a cheesy line, but it's true. And we can't elevate and grow as a unit in an area. I call ourselves our squad. And so one of the things that, I say is, and maybe this is more of the marketing side of me, inside of me too, is internal operations squad, or IOS, which is the real IOS, which equals to investing on selflessness. And so a lot of the things that we characterize in kind of our core principle is selflessness. In internal operations, we've got to touch a lot of different areas in game operations, facilities aspects, all of that stuff. Um, and so we've got to learn how to be selfless in some of our actions, in our ways of being able to um, help everyone out so we can make a better product and experience for those that are new coming in. And sometimes that means troubleshooting. Sometimes that means fixing problems on the fly. Sometimes that means filling in a hole because one of the areas didn't have a student worker, or staff member was out sick, all of that stuff. And so a lot of our stuff and the way we grow is, through that leader model, but also selflessness is being that top word. And I don't say it's a buzzword. It's really our core principle, and really how we shape what we do on a daily basis.
Yeah, I mean, so when I was at the University of Oklahoma, I worked game ops as well, and I'll tell you, like, you'll never meet a crew of more selfless people especially in college athletics, than the crew that has to come in at, like, right after the basketball game and tear up the floor and put down the gymnastics stuff and then convert it for wrestling the next day. And man, I'll tell you, like, it's one thing after the other, and it is all hands on deck. And if you're sitting over there complaining like, "Oh, my hands hurt from putting this gymnastics floor together," well, dude, their hands hurt too, right? Like, you got to be a little bit selfish, invest in a good pair of gloves, and let's keep it moving for today, and we can complain later. And like, sometimes I think that is lost, especially when and it's funny that we have the internal and external piece, right? Like, Kyle's job is to make it look really glamorous a lot of the time, and your job is to explain to a lot of people, like, yo, this is the unglamorous part a lot of the time, because we're the ones emptying out the trash, and like, if the trash is overflowing, our job as internal ops is to make external look really, really good. Right. So
Absolutely.
somebody better go take out that trash. And I think it's, to echo one of our buddies, Kip Io, and I know we talk about this a lot, but I mean, I remember working with his team and just being out there in Oregon, and he gave a talk about being a better noticer. And I think that goes right into what you're talking about with selflessness, is like, let me just notice what's going on and try to influence this space the right way. And I would be hard pressed to think that there are a lot of times where good intentions yield a disastrous result, right? And it's almost better to, like, approach
Mhm.
it with good intentions and almost ask for forgiveness if something goes wrong, because you were trying to do something right. And still try to make that difference that we're all sort of in our own way seeking to make.
hmm Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I think that falls into line with the servant leadership aspects too, right? And so, that's a big piece of what we are. We're servants at the end of the day, and that's how we lead. And I think just kind of even through our student workers too. We have two individuals that are our student leaders that help kind of shape the freshmen, and being able to, hey, make sure you submit your hours, make sure you're doing all those things, and it builds up. So it's not just the head guy that's saying you've got to do this and you got to do that. That's not the case with us. We're very I think independent is maybe a good word for us, and we're able to rely and trust on each other to get those things done when we need to get them done. And um, I think that's a really big piece of how we serve each other and how we serve others is just through that selflessness aspect that it's been really cool to see grow the last few years that I've been here. And it's exciting to see on a daily basis kind of the growth there, from even our student workers, even teaching and training some of the interns that just came on, and teaching some of those full timers that come on as well. Because we're all learning and growing through each other, and being able to give that context and that background knowledge that sometimes you don't get when you're just coming in from a different place, or different culture, climate, whatever. So yeah, yeah,
I think internal is like one of the ultimate heat the cheese professions. Just because it is like you need to notice, you need your head on a swivel, you need to, there is no like that's not my job. Like I mean last year trying to run in-game experience and being shorthanded, like smoke machines for starting lineups. Like there's two internal student workers who are pulling the drape open and hitting the smoke machine button. Like you're now on the external crew, right? Like it's just, if there's a
right.
job to be done, it's your job and you do it. And talking a lot about the student workers, I think one of the best examples of that is one of the worst jobs that there is to do, but it's one of the ones where like misery loves company and we're all going to suffer together. And it's putting the puzzle pieces down in the tag floor. Like it's graduation time, it's step show time, and a scene. We have these gigantic puzzle pieces. They're like 3 by 3 feet, 4 by 4 feet, and you gotta link them to put them down to save the floor. And it is an amazing thing the first time you go through it and you're going, okay, it's just a puzzle piece, but there is a system and there is an art to it and a science to it. And, there's such thing as too little help and there's such thing as too much help. And, we had this step show that we host, during homecoming week, and all these sorority girls are like, they're out there trying to help and it's awesome, but they're all like in the way, like they're trying to help, but it's like, whoa, you can't just do it like this. Because if you screw one row of it up, 20, 30 feet down the floor, everything's screwed up. You got to redo it. And it's this magical thing that happens. And it was really cool because a couple of Wyatt student workers are over there like teaching these Kappa Deltas how to put the puzzle pieces down. Right. And that student worker may never have done that to a full-time staffer or felt intimidated or whatever, but in that moment like they were the expert, and so they felt empowered to be able to do that. And there are a number of opportunities that kind of pop up throughout the year, where something like that shows. And then that's one of those really cool pivotal moments, because it's like, hey, no, like you're prepared for this because of what you did last week or 2 months ago or a year ago or something like that. And so you're able to capitalize on the now because of everything that kind of prepared you for that. But um Wyatt, we've got a few minutes left here. I wanted to see if you could dive into a little bit of the what you're doing from your doctoral work, and a bit of the research and the readings and things on this. Keep coming back to that word identity, that we talked about. Can you share a little bit about kind of I guess the readings, the research, the data and stuff like that you are trying to dive into from this transition period for students getting into the real world, and just kind of share with everybody a little bit of what your work is. So in 10, 15 years, when you're a best-selling author and you're traveling the world, and changing all these people's lives, we can say that our 14 listeners can say they heard it first here on Essential Coaching Conversations.
That's right. That's right. No, so yeah, it's it's been kind of a passion project of mine, um, to work on. I've been working on a book basically ever since I graduated from my master's, and it's been ripped up, thrown away a couple of times. I get to 30, 40 pages, threw that out the window, and have restructured it a little bit more. Um, but really, it's the identity aspect, understanding who you are, and being able to identify and understand how to answer the now what questions, or what now. It's the I just graduated. What now? What do I do now? How do I get a job? What do I do? And so in that, some of the research and things like that is more of tapping into how to understand and how to explain what the why means in those, no more students that transferring or transitioning into the real world, and being able to find that purpose and that sense of meaning and belonging for them. Like Kyle said, the team environment isn't just for student athletes. There's a team environment in clubs that they are in, student organizations and different groups on campus that may not be student athlete specific or focused. But there is a sense of belonging in college that sometimes isn't necessarily easy to transition to into the real world. Um, and so being able to find that sense of purpose, that sense of identity for them. There's a bunch of stories out there of students, going to college because their parents told them they got to go to college, they got to get a degree, and they go through and they may change up their degree program 4, 5, 6 times. Maybe they are lucky and they go through one, but it might be a generic one, or it might be one that's not specific or focused, that they can really dive into, and it's more of a generic one or a broader scope of something that when they graduate it doesn't give them the clarity that they're looking for. And so being able to help shape kind of some of that for individuals that are transitioning out of college and into the real world, or even out of high school for that matter, and into the real world if they're not going to college. Um, it's really about figuring out those kind of what now questions, and being able to figure out who you are at your core. And sometimes that's going to change. Sometimes you got to dive right into it, and for you guys it was coaching, right? And you guys dove right into it, and learned all of the scopes, and now it's transitioning and a pivoting to a different area, which is great because you learned it now, and instead of 50 years down the road. And so, being able to figure out those aspects in ourselves is is the biggest part of why I want to do this. There's so many people that say out there that they're confused or have no idea what they want to do, have no sense of belonging, meaning, purpose, and it's hard to hear, but it's the truth. And so, being able to help kind of share kind of the research that I'm starting to do, and being able to kind of blend that into some perspectives and some of my experiences through my life, and being able to help share that in a meaningful way, um, I hope can be able to help impact some lives, to help them kind of get into a better step or into the right direction earlier than maybe I did, and earlier than all of us may have. So I think that's a big part of this book, and in the sense of understanding what identity is within ourselves is really the biggest, truest reason, of why I wanted to do it. Like I said before, I didn't necessarily know what I wanted to do right out of right out of college, and it took me some time, and it took me some months of just not focusing on anything except for right now. And because it can be overwhelming to think about all of the things that you could or could not do. But sometimes you just got to focus on today, and be in the present moment, and being able to learn one thing each day that can help you grow, to be able to help shape where you want to be, and the structure that you want to have within you as you move forward. So that's a little bit about that. And I think the dissertation aspect with it, of more of that, more of the infinite game, that long term thinking, is going to help kind of shape more of the identity aspect of being able to not focus so much on the short term, but understand the long term aspects, and the reasons why, if you learn one thing now and continue to learn one thing a day, that's just going to accrue and grow into something really special in the long term.
Yeah, thank you, Wyatt, for sharing and for joining us and talking about that. I agree with you that I think a lot of people out there are trying to fake it as best as they possibly can. And again, you're talking to two guys that had it all figured out 10 years ago. We knew exactly what we were supposed to do and what we were going to do for the rest of our lives. And of course, here we are not doing those things. And I've been real open about, the job titles have changed, but the job has always remained the same. It's people, it's connections, it's selflessness, it's being able to serve others and lead and trying to impact lives. And if you're into that, you can do that anywhere you are. And I think if there's a lesson out there for anybody, is that don't put so much pressure on yourself to have it all figured out at 16 years old, 18 years old, 22 years old, or 39 years old. I remember in seventh grade, we went to a job fair and they were like, you have to tell us what you want to be for a living. And I was a scientist because I was good at biology. And it was like, I don't know what I want to be. And I still think a lot of people out there are just kind of going through the motions, or they're doing what they need to because they got to pay bills. And there's nothing wrong with that at all, but you can still find your identity, your sense of purpose. You get married, you have kids, you have a dog, you buy a house, you have a hobby, you do all these things. And there's so much joy in life and all of these other aspects that even if you figure out what your job or your occupation should be, that doesn't have to be your entire identity. There's more to you. You're a painter, you're a musician, you're a poet, you write, you make music, you content create, you serve at church. Like you're a good neighbor. Like there is so many different ways to have the identity and serve and live and do all those things. And I think if you can take a step back, take a deep breath, and realize that it's okay to either not have some things figured out, and just give yourself some grace. And so I think having these conversations are important. And for us, the Raka guys, the pathway to success, or congruence as we call it, the first step is reflection. And you've got to be willing to take a step back, think on some things, reflect. That reflection brings about that awareness, that clarity that you've mentioned several times here. And then once you can reach some of that clarity, you begin to align to whatever that identity and that success looks like. And again, it's a perpetual journey. It's not ever going to end. It should not ever end. It should be ongoing. And I think that's more of that infinite game that you're talking about. There really is no final destination here. It's just checkpoints along the way that allow us to kind of keep bebopping down the journey. So we appreciate you for coming on and just sharing your perspective, and that this is out there. And I think it's really great when our audience gets to hear just a different voice and point of view, and where this is coming from, especially in your line of work. That might be different than a junior high math teacher who's coaching football and kind of thing. At the end of the day, we're all kind of dealing with the same thing. So appreciate you for hopping on. We look forward to potentially having another conversation with you down the road as your work expands. And we wish you nothing but the best in your identity, and where you're going with your doctoral program and everything. And so we appreciate you for hopping on.
Yes, thank y'all for having me. Really appreciate it. It's been great. I've enjoyed it.
Awesome. Nassim, you got anything else, my man?
No, this has been super enlightening. And like you said, it's really good to hear from people that, operate sort of in the shadows of making things work. And the respect that I have for everybody that does what they do in college athletics, and it's a tenuous time in college athletics, right? And the show must go on though, and that's something that, when you first start in it, that's what there's two things: protect the brand and the show must go on. And it's always next man up. And just to hear your perspective and know the work you're doing with young people, I think, especially Kyle and I, like we've sort of built our brand around that exponential generational change piece. And that doesn't just happen when you're with, middle school, high school kids. It's also people that are transitioning between, careers, or transitioning between getting in and out of school. And I just think you're doing really, really good work. And I appreciate you taking the time coming on today.
Yes, thank you guys for having me. I think last note I've got, if you guys haven't watched Ted Lasso, that's kind of the infinite game mindset right there, to a T, in regards to the coaching aspect. One of the things that he says is, I don't necessarily care about the wins and losses. I care about growing the people to make them better. And I think that's the difference right there between the short term and the long term, because when you're growing the people, the wins are going to come, as you grow those people to make them better.
Awesome. Thanks again, Wyatt. As Asim said, the best thing he saw was our brand new T-shirt and hoodie. Defense does not win championships. You got to get it straight. It's connections that win championships. And folks like Wyatt will go out tomorrow and make more connections and deepen those. And so there's championships along the way for Louisiana Tech, internal, external, I hope, and for everybody out there. So thank y'all very much for tuning in. We will see y'all next time.